In this video, I'm going to be ranking every ski mountain in North America and telling you which ones you should go to for your next ski trip. I've been traveling around the US and Canada for the past 3 years in this camper van that I built out, and in the wintertime, I go from ski mountain to ski mountain. So in the past 3 years, I've skied over 50 different resorts, and today I'm going to be ranking them and telling you my favorites. I do want to give a disclaimer that these are pretty much all going to be Epic or Ikon pass resorts, since those are the passes that I've had for the past few years, but I did get day passes at a couple different resorts, so I'll throw those on this list as well. There's definitely some other resorts that are awesome and great for skiing that aren't on one of the mega passes, but if I didn't ski it, I don't feel like I can judge it accurately for this list, so I won't be including any non-Epic and Ikon resorts in this list. And that's just to keep things fair. Also for this video, I'll just be focusing on resorts west of the Mississippi, and that's just because it seems a little bit unfair to review something like Whistler against a Waterville Valley in New Hampshire. So just to keep things slightly fair in this video from being, like 6 hours long, I'll just be reviewing the West Coast ones in this video, and then we'll go east and northeast in the next video. Naturally, with a list like this, there's going to be some personal biases that are inherent and that you can't really get rid of, but I'm going to do my best to separate those from the actual criteria and ranking of the mountains. So what I'm mostly going to be focusing on is the actual terrain and resort itself, the accessibility and availability of good terrain at each mountain, and snow quality. So how much average snowfall does each mountain get, and what's the quality of the snow? Is it like light and fluffy, that kind of thing. There's also more of a focus on advanced to expert terrain and how much of that there is at each mountain, since that's what I prefer to ski. So that's kind of how I'll be judging these resorts. Again, these are just my opinions, and a lot of times you can rate a resort or how much fun you have at a resort just on basically how good the snow was on the day that you went. But I'm trying to push that aside for this video. Just remember, you can have a good day skiing at pretty much any resort, and the important thing is that you're getting out there and skiing. All right, with all that said, let's jump into the rankings. Okay, so we're here in our tier maker list. We have our S, A, B, C, D, and F categories with over 50 mountains. I don't remember the exact number, but it's a lot of mountains of all of the major ones. So everything on Ikon and Epic is in this list here for anything west of the Mississippi in the US and Canada. Like I said, I'm focusing on Ikon and Epic mostly because I've skied all of those, but there are some independent mountains thrown in here too, but it doesn't have every mega pass mountain on this list just because I haven't skied there, and so I want to be fair to the rankings. All right, let's get started. We're going to do this by region, so let's start off with Colorado first. First for Colorado, let's start with A-Basin here. A-Basin is one of my favorite resorts in Colorado. It's got awesome terrain, great steeps. The east wall is no joke if you hike up there. It has some of like the craziest hiking terrain in the state, or the craziest hikes to get to some sick chutes over on the east wall there. And it's usually open pretty late into the season too. Like one of the latest in Colorado. Yeah, just all around great vibes at Asin, and I feel like it deserves a good amount of respect. It does have less of a resort feel than a lot of other places in Colorado, so it's very laid back, very chill, so I really like A-Basin, but it is a little bit on the smaller side compared to some of the other Colorado resorts, so you can ski most of the expert stuff within probably like 3 days, so for that reason we're gonna throw it into B tier. Next up we got Aspen Highland. So I broke up Aspen Highland and Aspen Snowmass in this map. So Highland is the more difficult and steep of all the 4 Aspen mountains, and it's my personal favorite of the Aspens. It's not the biggest, but it does have the steepest terrain and the highest concentration of steep terrain, so it's definitely more of the expert mountain. Just like a super sick, pretty long hike to this massive steep bowl. That's awesome, and I recommend you doing it at least once. It's going to be the best run of your day. So with that, I think I'm going to put Aspen Highlands into A tier, mainly because of the Highland Bowl, and it's mostly like all steeps there. The next we got its neighbor, Aspen Snowmass. So Aspen Snowmass is a fun mountain too. It's huge. Like there's so much terrain that you can ski at Snowmass. So it's like mostly like intermediate terrain, but there is still some good stuff over in the Hanging Valley area and the Cirque head wall. So for that reason, I think I'm gonna put it in B tier just because I still like skiing Highlands more, but it's still a good mountain. Next up we have Beaver Creek. So another epic resort. I'm going to be honest, Beaver Creek's not really my favorite mountain. I don't know, there's just not a lot of super steep or advanced or expert style terrain there. It's more intermediate kind of family style mountain, and it can be fun, but I don't know, it's not really for me, so I'm going to put it in D tier. Next onto a big one, we got Breckenridge. So I really like Breckenridge. I don't know what it is about it. There's something that feels good about Breck for me. So it's got pretty much every kind of terrain that you could think of, everything from beginner all the way up to advanced and experts. You can get some really gnarly chutes up in the stuff that's above the tree line over in like the Sixth Sense and the lake chutes. So yeah, it really just has kind of everything that you want, like big mountain skiing feel. It feels like a big mountain. You got above tree line stuff, bowls, chutes, rocks, intermediate, park. It really does have pretty much everything that you could want. The only thing is it can be pretty crowded, especially on the weekends, and it is a bit more touristy than some of the other ones, especially more than A-Basin. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it in A tier. So it is one of my favorite mountains in Colorado, especially off of 70, but the crowds can be kind of a deterring factor. Next up, and not too far down the road, we got Copper Mountain. I actually like Copper a lot. It's one of my favorite resorts in Summit County. It's close there with Breck and A-Basin, but it's close. I don't know. Copper might take it as a little bit of a personal favorite, but I think from a terrain and availability wise, I still think Breck is a little bit better, so I'm gonna put it into B tier here with A-Basin and Snowmass. There is still really good terrain at Copper. In those back bowls, you got some good bowls and some good steep chutes that you can send, and the mountain is really nicely sectioned off in general, so it's like the front side and the couple different lifts are more like intermediate to advanced stuff, and then if you make your way to the back, you can hit the expert stuff, so I do really like that. But I don't know, I just feel like Breck has a little bit bigger feel and there's more options over there, even if there are maybe some more choke points. Now a little bit further away, we got Crested Butte over near Gunnison, Colorado. Now, Crested Butte gets a lot of hype, and I do think it's pretty well deserved. There's some awesome steep terrain and really like gnarly steeps and chutes and rocks, and you can get a little bit crazy here at Crested Butte, especially if you're willing to hike. So there's some really great hike to terrain. Some of it can be a little bit annoying to get to, and coverage can be not always great there. So if you go into Crested, I do recommend going later in the season, like mid-February or later, to let things get filled in a little bit more, and you're gonna have a better time than if you're going earlier in the season. It also just looks cool with the point, so I do like the way that it looks. So with that, we're gonna put Crested Butte up in A tier. Now moving on, looks like next in Colorado is Keystone here. Now I'm gonna be honest, I don't really like Keystone that much. I don't know, it just seems kind of flat to me. There's not a lot of like expert or steep kind of terrain. I guess those back bowls could be okay, but I don't know, just every time I go to Keystone, they're just not great. I don't know if it's because of like sun exposure or just bad conditions, but I don't know, I just feel underwhelmed every time I go to Keystone. And it's a pretty big tourist spot as well, so there are gonna be like huge crowds. So I don't know, it's not really my favorite personally. I will say if you do park, then it does have a sick park, so it could be worth it just for the park. So with that, I think I'm gonna throw it into D tier. Yeah, I don't know, with it being so close to Breckenridge and A-Basin, I'd rather just go to one of those two. Okay, now it looks like we go for a little while, and then we come up on Steamboat down here. So Steamboat's up in the north, like kind of western of Colorado, and it's usually hailed for its like great tree skiing, which it honestly does have good trees, but I don't know, if it's not powdery or not a powder day, they're just kind of okay in my opinion. So Steamboat's not my favorite either. It's kind of underwhelming to me, to be honest. It's just pretty flat, and there's not really any kind of expert terrain that's like super steep or super advanced. It's more some awesome tree skiing if you get a good powder day, but other than that, it was kind of lackluster in my opinion. You can still have fun here, but I don't know, maybe I just wasn't at the right spots or didn't know the best places on where to go, but I just wasn't really impressed, so D tier it is. Now we move a little bit further into more southern Colorado with Telluride. Remember before a second ago when I said I think Breck or Copper is my favorite mountain? I lied, I forgot about Telluride. So Telluride is definitely my favorite mountain in Colorado. It's just huge. It's got any kind of terrain that you want. It's got awesome big mountain, big skiing feel. It has some gnarly terrain and chutes that you can go to. Some of them are a little bit out of the way, so you kind of gotta to hike to them off of Palmyra, and then you gotta hike for a little bit, but they're absolutely worth it. The snow is super light. It's great quality. It gets a good amount of snow too down there near Durango. And then the town of Telluride is super awesome as well too. So I highly recommend a visit to Telluride. You definitely will not be disappointed. It does get a lot of hype, but it's not even just like hype. It's just an energy vortex that you can't really deny. Also, it's not usually too crowded either, since it's kind of out of the way and the middle of its own thing, so it's not near Denver or any major city really, so you're not going to get the kinds of crowds that you would get at one of the bigger epic resorts. So with that, it's either going to be S or A. I think I'm going to put it in A. I don't think it's quite S. It's very close to S, but a lot of the best stuff is hike to terrain. Yeah, I don't know, it's close. I think I'm going to stick with A though. Next up, we got the Crown of Colorado, Vail Resort. I might get some hate for this, but I think Vail is overrated. Like, I don't really like Vail. like that much, like at all. It just seems kind of flat. There's not anything super steep or expert terrain really. Yeah, the back bowls are fun, especially if it snows, but they get tracked out so quickly and they're not like steep. They have like some pitch to them, but it's not, I don't know. I just think it gets overhyped. The village is really cool though, so I do like the Vail Village. It's cool to just kind of hang around and chill there, but it also gets super busy and super crowded and pretty bougie, but I don't know. So if you're more intermediate, this will be a good mountain for you, so you'll have fun, but I just don't usually have the best time whenever I go to Vail, so we're going to throw it at C tier because I think it is still better than those ones. All right, and rounding out Colorado, we got Winter Park. I like Winter Park a lot. So it doesn't have the most expert terrain or a lot of really steep kind of expert terrain, but I don't know. It's just an all-around good time whenever I go. It's good vibes. It's a fun mountain. You got the whole Mary Jane side and then the regular Winter Park side. So I'll usually just chill on the Mary Jane side unless I'm going up to the Cirque area and gonna do the expert stuff over there. But I don't know. I've had fun going with friends to Winter Park, and it's a fun time, really. It's pretty close to Denver, and I think most of the faces are more north-facing, so the snow tends to stay a little bit better. But yeah, it's just kind of a feel-good mountain, even if it doesn't have the most expert terrain. So for that reason, I think I'm going to put it in C tier. So it's still a good mountain, but just doesn't have as much expert stuff. So that's why we'll put it in C. All right, and if I'm looking right, I think that closes out Colorado. Looks like we didn't have anything in S tier for Colorado. So what do you think about that? I think I'm still pretty comfortable with that based on what mountains we have left. So let me know what you think in the comments. But next, let's move on to Utah. Now, I've spent a good amount of time in Utah. It's probably my favorite state to ski in. What they say about the Utah snow is true. It's just nice and light champagne powder. So if you've never skied Utah, you definitely need to make a trip out to Utah. You won't regret it. First up, we got Alta. Yes, Alta, not Alta. So Alta gets some of the most snow in all of the country, and you'll usually get over 400 inches on average, except for last year when it was over 900 inches, which was crazy season. Was stoked to be out here for that. And like I said, that snow is some of like the best light snow. It's my favorite kind of snow to ski. If you've ever skied it, you know what I'm talking about. But you'll get that snow throughout most of Utah, at least in the Cottonwood Canyons. There's a lot of good varied terrain at Alta, so you get some intermediate stuff all the way up through some gnarly expert things. And when you do get a POW day, the openings of the sections are usually kind of like a staged opening. So ski patrol will usually make their way from one part of the mountain to the other, so you can kind of just follow them after they open up each section and ski some of the best fresh stuff right after them. So I do like that. But a lot of the best stuff is a little bit more hidden, or at least harder to get to than at Snowbird, I feel. Like there are some really great lines at Alta, but I feel like you have to know where they are or search for them a little bit more than at Snowbird, the neighbor next door. Snowbird is just like right there and everything is good. Alta is also skiers only. So if you're a snowboarder, sorry, but you can't go. Well, I guess you can go down, but you can't go back up, so you can't ride the lift back up. So for that reason, out of solidarity with our snowboard brethren, I think I'm going to put it at A tier. But I do really like Alta. It's a really great mountain. Now let's jump over to its neighbor, Snowbird. Critically acclaimed Snowbird. And lots of things to love about Snowbird. It's one of my personal favorite mountains in all of the world. And Snowbird really is the whole package. It has like everything that you could really want when it comes to a advanced to expert ski mountain. You get incredible snow, like some of the best snow in the world. You have top to bottom tram laps. You have open bowl faced skiing, steep chutes, trees, cliffs, rocks. It is the whole package. So I just love Snowbird. It's not great for intermediates, so there's not really many easy ways down the mountain, which I'm personally fine with. But if you're going with intermediate skiers, they might not have the best time. But just everywhere that you go on Snowbird is just incredible. So it has the Mineral Basin's backside, you got the Peruvian Gulch and like the Cirque side, and then you got Gad Valley. And so all of those are very different areas of Snowbird and have their own kind of qualities to them, but they're all so much fun. And just the snow there, like I said, it's basically like weightless if you get it on like a good deep winter powder day, and there's really not any kind of feeling like it. So I will say that driving up Little Cottonwood Canyon and parking at Snowbird can be a bit of a pain, especially on a weekend. If it snows, you're gonna have to wake up pretty early. Not like Denver early most of the time, but it can get pretty backed up and you get the red snake coming out of the canyon. So that is one not fun thing about Snowbird. But with all that said, I think we have our first S tier. So yeah, it doesn't get better than Snowbird in my opinion. So if you've never made it out to Snowbird, I definitely recommend a trip there. The biggest drawback for me for Snowbird is that you only get 7 days there on Ikon Pass, which I'm sure the locals love, but me as not really local, I need more, especially since that 7 days is split between Alta and Snowbird. You only get 7 days combined. So I just need more bird. All right, so that's going to do it for Little Cottonwood Canyon. Now let's move over to Big Cottonwood Canyon, starting with Brighton. Brighton's its own vibe, really. So it's a solid, like, fun, playful mountain that's been, like, heavily influenced by snowboard culture, we'll say. So if that's your thing, you'll love Brighton. If it's not your thing, it might not be your favorite mountain. I have fun at Brighton, but it's not really my favorite mountain as far as terrain goes. I feel like there's good intermediate and advanced terrain, but the expert terrain is lacking a little bit. So you can get some good stuff and a few good runs off of the Millie chair off to the right side, and then the cliff sections that's like not really out of bounds between Millie and the crest chair. That's also really good, and you get some good stuff in there too. But other than that, it's not super steep, but it is fun. So there are lots of cliffs and lots of like small cliffs and rocks that you can just pop off of and jump. So I will say it's a very fun mountain. But as far as like giving you that big mountain feel, you don't really get that. But it is a good vibe, and I do have fun when I go there. But it's just not my favorite in all of Utah. So for that reason, I think I'm gonna put it at B or C. I think I'll throw it at C, just because you don't really get many super steep or extreme runs. But it is still a vibe, and if you like park skiing and that culture, then this is where you're going to want to be. Then moving over to Brighton's neighbor, still in Big Cottonwood Canyon, we got Solitude. Now, I don't think Solitude gets enough credit, or people don't give it enough credit for what it really deserves. A lot of people prefer Brighton to Solitude, but I actually like Solitude more than Brighton, and that's mainly due to the terrain. I just feel like there's more steeper stuff at Brighton that's pretty easily accessible still. So you get some good stuff off of the summit chair, like right under the summit chair, or going down Milk Run to get there, or that Headwall Forest or Black Forest, whatever it's called. And then you still got the whole Honeycomb Canyon as well, which is incredible when it's open. The thing with Honeycomb though is it's not a great layout for lapping it, because you'll need to take like 3 chairs to get back over to the top of Honeycomb Canyon. So that's a little bit annoying, but I don't know, it's still a good run. Obviously, we're still in the Cottonwood, so the snow quality is light and awesome. Solitude does to get a lot of snow as well. And if you're feeling really adventurous, then you can even like hike up to the Fantasy Ridge if it's open. It doesn't seem to be open super often, but you can have some really like gnarly hike and like a tough hike up there, and some crazy shoots off that, the Fantasy Ridge, and the Honeycomb shoots off the back there, or off the other side. They did start doing paid parking at Solitude though, which I don't like. So unless you have 4 people coming in your car, which I don't usually, being, single person in a van most of the time. So that's one detriment, and getting up Big Cottonwood Canyon can be a pain too. Not as bad as Little Cottonwood Canyon usually though. But for that reason, I think I am going to put it in B tier though. Next we got Deer Valley. So Deer Valley can get kind of a rap as being like a bougie, not super great ski area, but I think it's still a good area. It's not my favorite in Utah, but there is good stuff, and I do think it deserves more credit than what a lot of people give it. It's a fun mountain that's skiers only, like Alta, so sorry snowboarders, you're not allowed here also, sadly. And that's kind of why it gets the rap that it does. In general, it's not the most steep. There are some good sections though, so if you go over to like the Empire and Lady Morgan side, or even like go over to the Daily Chutes, there is some good steeper sections. They're not super long steep sections, but you can usually find pockets of snow for at least a day or two after a good storm. So I do think it's worth taking the trip to Deer Valley, even just to try out the food. If you want to spend $30 for food in the lodge, it's good food, and it's a super bougie lodge. So with that, let's put Deer Valley at C tier. Now for the Deer Valley neighbor, Park City, so the bigger brother to Deer Valley. So Park City is another one that gets a lot of hype that I don't personally see. Like, don't get me wrong, it's a fun mountain and it's massive. Like, there's so much terrain and so many lifts here, especially now that it's merged with the canyons. But most of it's not my ideal type of terrain. It's usually pretty flat for the most part, and I just feel like I'm doing a lot of traversing when I'm at Park City, like trying to get from one chair to the other, and I feel like that's just half the day whenever I go. There are some good areas too, like you can go up to Jupiter Peak and hike up Jupiter Peak, and there's some really good pitch and terrain and stuff over there, or you can go over to the 9990 on the canyon side, and there's a couple other sections over on canyons that are good. So you do get good snow as well at Park City, but it's a little bit lower elevation than the Cottonwood, so it's typically a little bit less than you would get at like Snowbird or Alta. So I typically just prefer to go to one of those than I do to Park City. But I will say, if you're going for a ski trip, the Après Ski and like the village and the town of Park City is super fun, so that's a good time. So if you're trying to plan a trip with friends and you guys don't care as much about getting the most extreme, gnarly kind of terrain, then Park City could be a good option. So with that, let's put Park City into C tier right next to its brother, Deer Valley. Next up, we're still in Utah, heading north to Powder Mountain. And with a name like Powder Mountain, you'd expect it to be the best one on this list, especially since it's not on Ikon or Epic, so it should not be crowded. But I don't know. People hype up Powder Mountain, and I just don't have a good time there. I don't know if I'm not going to the right places or what, but I've explored pretty much the whole mountain, and I think it's way overrated. I don't know if it's an inside joke in Utah, so they tell you to go to Powder Mountain so that they can have more space for themselves at Snowbird, or if they actually think it's good, but I don't know. Powder Mountain's just, it's not my favorite. It's my least favorite in Utah, honestly. Like, yes, they do get powder and the snow is really good, but that's just because you're in Utah. Like, you still get the good snow at Snowbird, Alta, and the Big Cottonwood Canyons as well. And the main reason I don't like it is just because it's not steep enough. Like, it just feels very flat going from one place to the other. So even when you do get a deep powder day, you're not really going that fast. You're just kind of like slowly surfing, which is still fun, but I don't know, it's just not my favorite terrain. You do have some good stuff off of the Paradise Chair that you can like throw a couple of rocks off of and you get more steepness there, but the chair is like fixed grip, so it's so slow and long to get up to the top, and it's cold, and I don't know, it's not worth paying the extra money to go to Powder Mountain, in my opinion, when there's so many other good mountains in Utah that I can go to with the passes that I already have. So with that said, D tier. Sorry, Powder. And for the last one in Utah, we got Snow Basin. Now, some people may disagree with me on this, but I think Snow Basin is the third best resort after Snowbird and Alta. I don't know. I just have a good time every time I go to Snow Basin, and I like the layout. The snow is really good up there too. You get some really like good steep runs off of the John Paul side, and then there's some good stuff over in the Strawberry side. So I will say it's not always the steepest, but it does have good steep terrain that you can go to, especially if there's good visibility, which unfortunately on the Strawberry side, a lot of times it's socked in a cloud. But if it's not, then you can hike up and go over to the Middle Bowl side, which does have some pretty gnarly terrain and some good chutes and stuff to send. Also, the lodges and the bathrooms here are super bougie. Like, we're talking marble and oak doors in the bathrooms. So it's probably even fancier than Deer Valley. So that's fun in general, just to go and see that. So yeah, I always have a good time at Snow Basin. So I think I'm going to put it in B tier up here with Solitude. So that rounds out all of Utah. So we got our first S tier with Snowbird, and then we added a couple more in A, B, and C. And yeah, like I said, Utah's just one of my favorite places to ski. I think the snow is the best there, personally, so I always have a good time skiing in Utah. Now let's move on just a little bit north, up to Montana and Wyoming. First up on our list is Big Sky, Montana. Big Sky is a really solid mountain, so it does really have everything you could want, from beginner all the way up to the most expert terrain. It's huge, like there's so many different areas and places to ski at Big Sky, and it is really a great time when the snow is good. The snow's not always good, unfortunately. Like this past season's been pretty crappy at Big Sky, and so then it's not always great, but on a good snow season, it's up there with the best of them for sure. It's even got like triple blacks if you take the tram all the way to the top, where you'll need a friend and Abby gear and stuff. So if you want to ski like the big couloir and some of the other crazy couloirs and chutes that are up there, then those are rated as triple black, but they're pretty gnarly and pretty sweet. So I think it's the only ski area in the US and Canada that has like a quote unquote triple black. I don't know if they made it up or whatever, because there's stuff that's just as hard as at other mountains, but I don't know. It's fun time. I don't like how to get there you need to take the tram, and the tram is not included in the lift ticket though. So if you have an Ikon pass, you're going to need to pay extra money to take the tram up to the extra hard stuff, and the price varies depending upon the day and the demand. So it could be like $80 on the weekend, it could be $30 midweek. You don't know until you see the sign and you get there. So that's a little bit annoying personally, but even with that, I think I'm gonna put Big Sky in S tier, just because of the type of terrain that you can have, and it has so much, and it's big, and it's a good time when the snow is good. Okay, I think that's all that I have for Montana, because that's the only Ikon one there. So there are other mountains like Whitefish that I haven't been to yet that I would like to go to, but hopefully next season I can get there and update this tier list. But since I haven't been there, I don't want to, make a judgment that I haven't personally done. So next, let's move on to Wyoming, and we're going to start with Jackson Hole, the famed Jackson Hole ski mountain resort place. Let me start by saying Jackson Hole is incredible and it does live up to the hype. And if you haven't been there, you definitely need to take a trip out there. It's got over 4,000 feet of vert, so it's one of the bigger mountains in the US. And the snow is some of the lightest, best quality snow that you're gonna get. So it's like up there with Utah with like that same kind of super light, fluffy skiing or boarding on clouds kind of snow. It's a pretty big resort and it's steep from top to bottom, which is what I love about it, and it has some of the best terrain that you can get inbounds with a lot of backcountry and slack country access for some even more incredible terrain. And it has what's probably the most iconic inbound line in probably the whole world with Corbett's Couloir. I can never say that right. But yeah, Corbett's is sick. It looks scarier when you're up there than it does in the videos, which is saying something because in the videos it can look kind of scary. But if you're not feeling super confident, there is what they call the goat path where you can kind of slide down half of it and then drop in. But dropping Corbett's is definitely a rite of passage for any expert skier and worth the trip to Jackson Hole. I will say nowadays it can be kind of crowded, especially on a weekend, and it does have that more of like it's an interesting feel. It's like a bougie, like higher end resort feel that's still like a Western kind of thing. So I don't know. It's a good time, but it can be crowded. So if you're going on a weekend and it's a powder day, just be aware that you're probably going to be waiting in line, especially for the tram. So I'm sure this will come as no surprise, but we're also going to put Jackson Hole up in the S tier. Look at that. We got 2 S tiers right in a row. Wow. And now let's move over the ridge to Jackson Hole's little brother, Grand Targhee Resort. Grand Targhee is not on Ikon or Epic, but I did want to include it because it gets brought up a lot and I think it's worth mentioning. So I do think if you're making the trip to Jackson, you should take a day pass and go ski at Grand Targhee as well because it's definitely worth it. It's much less crowded than Jackson and they usually get just a little bit more snow too, with I think over like 500 inches per year on average, which is pretty crazy. It's not as steep top to bottom as Jackson, but it does have its steep sections and some good cliff lines, and just overall it's a super fun mountain, and I really enjoyed the time that I went to Grand Targhee. It can get kind of foggy at times though, so you can get socked in, which is a bit of a bummer and makes it difficult to see, but the snow makes it worth it. Like I said, there's not as much big mountain terrain, but it's still a really good time. So A or B, I think this is a tough one. I think I'm going to drop it in B. It's like a B plus. It's like a B plus A minus. So it's right on the line just because the snow is so good and it's a really great time. But I don't think it's quite up to like the Alta Telluride level. But it's definitely worth the day trip if you're in Jackson though. Next up, let's move down to New Mexico and check out Taos. I'm not gonna lie, Taos surprised me. I didn't know what to expect when I got there, but I was very pleasantly surprised with the terrain and the snow at Taos. I don't think it gets enough credit for what it is. It deserves more. It's generally pretty steep, like even the blue runs are probably steeper than what they would be in other resorts labeled as blue, but it's a really great resort, but it has access to some great expert runs as well. Like when Kashina Peak is open, that has a whole bunch of crazy chutes there, or you can hike up from Lift 2, I think, and go anywhere along that ridge line. I think it's like Juarez and some of those other areas are really good runs. And yeah, in just general, it's really steep. And it has some really good terrain. I had a lot of fun there and I didn't know what to expect. I will say one of the drawbacks of Taos is they don't get as much snow, especially relative to some of these other resorts on here, but it is good quality snow. It's just not as much, so you might not get as deep a powder day as you get at some of these other resorts. That being said, I think it's one of the best mountains in the Southwest for sure, and I'd have no problem making this one of my home mountains. So let's go. I think I'm going to put it in A tier. I really liked Taos. You may disagree with me on that, but I don't know. I liked it a lot. On to our next region now. Let's go to like Tahoe and then on to California after that. Notice we don't have anything in the F tier yet. So these have all been pretty decent mountains. So maybe we'll get something in F here soon. We'll see. We'll see what we got coming up. So let's start in South Lake Tahoe with Heavenly. I'll be honest, Heavenly is not my personal favorite. I don't think there's enough like steep or expert terrain there. Unless like Mott's or Killebrew is open, that's probably the best areas on the mountain. But yeah, for a mountain of that size, only having that small area of the canyons being like expert terrain, I don't know, just means it's not really my favorite. The rest is just kind of flat and intermediate, and I just feel like I'm traversing a lot of places to get to where I want to go. Kind of like Vail, or more like Park City, I guess. I guess it's kind of the Park City of Lake Tahoe if I had to describe it. But this also means that you don't get a lot of like crazy expert skiers going to Heavenly most of the time. So if the type of clientele going there is not usually the most expert skiers, then if you're going on those canyon runs, they tend to stay fresher a little bit longer. So just what I've kind of seen happen for the times that I've skied there. I will say South Lake Tahoe is a really cool area, and I do love Lake Tahoe in general. And the views at the top of Heavenly are incredible. It's hard to beat those for sure. But I don't know, the skiing's just not really my favorite. So let's go with D tier here. Yep, D tier sounds about right for me, especially with how crazy crowded it can be on the weekends too. Staying in South Lake Tahoe, we got Kirkwood up next. Now, Kirkwood's like a solid mountain for sure. Probably one of the best ones in Tahoe, at least South Lake Tahoe. Will it be my favorite? We'll find out in a second. But you do get kind of that big mountain terrain without feeling like a huge mountain at Kirkwood, but you still get some really cool chutes like over in Heart Chute and so those other chutes on that side of the mountain, and some good like steep runs. And the snow seems to be a little bit better or drier than at some of the other resorts because you're at a higher elevation base level than like a Heavenly. So it doesn't seem to be quite as wet here. I don't know. I just know I have a good time whenever I go to Kirkwood, and I'd rather be at Kirkwood than Heavenly. I do want to say you want to be aware of the traffic going down to Kirkwood though, because it can be quite a bit of a pain, especially on the weekend. And if the parking lot fills up at Kirkwood, you're in the middle of nowhere, so there's no like street parking or anywhere else that you can park. So you like have to turn around and go home and go back. So it's just kind of a waste of a day if you can't get any parking there. So just be aware of that before going to the mountain. So you're gonna have to leave decently early on a weekend to make sure you get parking. With all that said, I think I'm gonna throw Kirkwood into B tier here. We're starting to get a nice bell distribution here. Look at that. Minus this F. We got to get some of these mountains in F tier here. Not that I'm mad about that. That just means we got a lot of good mountains to ski at. Next, still in Tahoe, but moving north up to Truckee, we got North Star. So North Star is not my favorite of the Tahoe mountains. It's a bit smaller, a bit flatter, so you don't really get any kind of that big mountain feel, and there's not really anything super steep or crazy here, but it can still be a fun day for sure. There's good tree runs off the backside, and I will say the thing with Tahoe is it can be like a victim of its own success sometimes. If it gets too much snow, then it means that some of the bigger resorts are closed because they can't clear the snow out fast enough. You know, if you're getting like 3 feet of snow at a time. And during those times, it's not a bad idea to go to North Star because they might be open more often, or at least the parts of the bigger mountains that would be closed because of wind blown. That's not usually going to be happening at North Star since it's a little bit less windy there. So you can get a good powder day during a storm at North Star, I would say. But with all that said, still going to put it in D tier. Not quite F. I don't think it's deserving of F, but D tier, yeah. Next to the last one in Palisades on this list, since we don't have Sierra at Tahoe, I don't think, is Palisades. And here I'm including Palisades and Alpine just because they've connected the two with a gondola now, so you can get between them on the same day. So I think it's fair to put them in the same category now. So Palisades is sick, and it definitely gets the most hype out of the Tahoe mountains for sure, and it's definitely well deserved. Like the terrain at Palisades is like nothing else. It's all kinds of cliffs and rock drops, and it does have that crazy big mountain feel, especially under like the KT22 lift. There's all kinds of deeps and chutes and lines that you probably don't even want to drop, but they're there if you want to. And then other areas like the Granite Chief, you can go over and hike, and that's a fun area. Or if you're really feeling it and the weather's good, you can hike the Palisades, which has some gnarly cornices to drop off of there as well. But yeah, the terrain is just incredible and worth the trip. And they get so much snow there too. With all the storms, it can be kind of windy and things can close if they get too much snow. If they get like 3 to 5 feet in a day or two, like certain sections can close while they clean that out, or it can be pretty windy up at the top sometimes. But yeah, definitely worth the trip. It is the busiest of the Tahoe resorts though, so things will get tracked out pretty quickly. So that's kind of a bummer, and there can be definite crowds on the weekend, so just keep that in mind too. But all that being said, Palisades definitely deserves a spot in our S tier. So that's going to be all of the Tahoe resorts. So now let's head south a couple hours and still be in California, and we're going to check out Mammoth. The biggest thing about Mammoth for me is it really lives up to the name. It feels mammoth and feels huge and massive. Like you're looking at it and there's just like big white bowl/wall of snow that you're looking at when you get to Mammoth. So it really gives you that insane big mountain feel. It's got a little bit of everything for everybody. You got more intermediate stuff down towards the bottom to some like good advanced expert terrains up off of the gondola. I will say there's not like a lot of crazy expert terrains. Like, don't get me wrong, there is some really, really good stuff, like with Quavos and Hangmans and some of those other stuff off at the top of Climax. But there's not really stuff where I feel like I'm gonna die going off of it unless I accidentally go over the cliff that I know I'm not supposed to go down. So I don't know, it just feels perfect for my ski level, and I really appreciate that. So with that, I have a lot of fun at Mammoth. The snow is really good too. It gets some of the most snow in the country. Like last year I was skiing there in 4th of July, which is crazy, and they went all the way to August and still had stuff open, which was insane. And the snow, and it's at a little bit higher elevation than the other Tahoe mountains or other mountains in California. So the snow is probably the best in California, in my opinion. So Mammoth going up here, it's either going to be S or A. I think I'm going to drop it in A, but it's very close. It's like A plus. It's very close to S, but I think it's not quite there for me. Next, Mammoth has its little neighbor, June Mountain, not too far away. And I'm going to be honest, just don't even bother with June. It's very small, and there's no advanced or expert terrain, really. It's great for beginners, and the views are nice, but other than that, there's not really much there, in my opinion. Maybe I'm biased because I somehow managed to hurt myself at June in the park because I was bored. So maybe that's clouding this judgment a little bit, but yeah, it's funny. All of these ski mountains, no injuries. June, small mountain, somehow messed up my ankle. But anyway, F. First F tier. Nice. Sorry, June. Next up, still in California, I think this is our last California one, we have Big Bear. I'm going to save us all some time, just throw that in F right away. It's not a bad mountain by any means, it's just not like any of these. So if you're local to SoCal, then it's a fun mountain to go to, but if you want real skiing, just go a little bit further to Mammoth, or a decent amount further to Mammoth, and you'll be happier. But if you just need to get some laps in and you live in California, it'll work. But yeah, the snow is not usually super great since you're so far south, and there's usually lines because you're in Southern California. Everybody's trying to go ski for a little bit. So it's definitely not worth a destination trip. Okay, that's going to close out California, I think, if I'm looking at all these correctly. So now let's move on to the Pacific Northwest. So we got like Washington, Oregon, and I think Idaho too. For Pacific Northwest, let's start with Mount Bachelor. So Bachelor is in Bend, Oregon, which is a super cool town. I like Bend a lot. It's not the most extreme mountain out there, and it can be a little flat in spots, but it's a fun mountain when it gets snow. It's really unique, so it's a volcano, so you can ski 360 degrees off the top of Bachelor when the summit is open. Now, the summit's not always open if it's bad weather or windy, so you kind of got to be lucky for the summit to get open, but when it is, it's worth it and a really unique experience. And just the vibes in general at Bachelor are really good. So it's a fun mountain for sure. You're not going to be doing anything super crazy, but when they get good snow, it's really good and a lot of fun. And I do recommend a trip out there for sure. But that being said, I think I'm still going to throw it into B tier just because it's a unique experience. It's fun. It's a cool mountain. I have a lot of fun when I go there, but it doesn't have as much big mountain type feel. And it can be a little bit flat in some of the spots, especially through the trees on the sides there. Next is Crystal Mountain in Washington. So this is probably going to be like the biggest name for Washington ski resorts. I'm going to be honest, Crystal was kind of sleeper for me, so I didn't know what to expect, but I had a lot of fun at Crystal. There's tons of terrain that's worthy of exploring. You get some good chutes over to the side there. You can hike, like, I don't remember the name of it, over to the left side of the mountain. There's good like hike to terrain. There's some steep stuff, and then there's something for everyone, really. Maybe not like a lot of expert kind of terrain, but overall it's a fun mountain, and I have a good day at Crystal. You can also see views of Mount Rainier if it's clear. It can be cloudy a lot of the times, but if the clouds decide to part for you, then you can see Rainier, which is just incredible seeing it off in the distance there. And by off in the distance, I mean like very close. And it's still PNW conditions, so it can be wet or variable terrain or not always exactly sure what the snow is going to be like when you're there. So for that reason, I think I'm going to drop it into B tier, but it's close with A. If it had better snow, it could probably be A. So if you get good conditions, it's probably A, but variable conditions, not always super sure. So we're going to throw it in B. Next up, we have Snoqualmie. So I broke up Snoqualmie into two. So we have the summit at Snoqualmie and then Alpental. So they're like right next to each other, but you can't really ski from one to the other. So that's why I broke them up. And I also think they're different enough mountains that they warrant being broken up. So start at summit at Snoqualmie. So Snoqualmie in general is probably the closest ski area to Seattle, I think. So you'll get all the Seattle crowd coming here. And the summit at Snoqualmie is honestly not very good in my opinion. It's It's not bad. It's just, it leaves a lot to be desired. The runs are just super short, and there's not a whole lot of expert or advanced terrain. You can have some fun over on the east side, but I don't know. In general, it's not great, especially once you take Alpental out of it. Alpental is much better than the summit at Snoqualmie. So just don't bother with the summit. Just go to Alpental instead, especially if you're living or visiting the Seattle area. And both of these can get a decent amount of rain just because of where you are and, you know, Pacific Northwest skiing. So I'm going to drop the summit of Snoqualmie into F. And Alpental, I think I'm going to drop into either C or D. I think I'm going to go D. I kind of want to put it at C, but I think I'm going to leave it at D. Like, Alpental is actually really fun. It has good terrain, like much better than Summit at Snoqualmie. Like, you can have a lot of fun at Alpental, especially if you go into, like, I think it was called the Edelweiss Bowl, if I remember correctly. It's been a little while and I ski a lot of places. I don't remember the name of every area of every mountain, but there's some good stuff up there, like really good terrain. It's just very small. Like, it's all off of one chair unless you want to go like around to the back stuff. There is some gnarly things, but I don't know if you want to go do that kind of stuff alone. So if you have a buddy, then going out the gate could be fun. So yeah, just be aware of that. It's small, so there might be some crowds, especially on a weekend, but good vibes. Alpental's fun. Staying in Washington, now we have Stevens Pass. And some people seem to really like Stevens Pass, but I don't know. I just didn't really see what was very special about it. Maybe it's just me, but I didn't really get the hype. There wasn't anything wrong with it. Like, it wasn't bad. I just wasn't very impressed, and it felt like I was like leaving wanting more, or it needed something else. I don't know. I just couldn't really put my finger on it. I just wanted something else or something more there. There's a well-rounded mix of the terrain, so there's a little bit of everything with mostly intermediate, but you get a couple steep black and double black runs. And I think the Seventh Heaven chair is actually the steepest chair in North America. So like going up like that. So that's kind of cool. But so it is pretty steep, like over in that section, but I don't think the runs are as steep as the chair is. Typically, there will also be a lot of traffic coming from Seattle to Stevens, especially on a weekend, like any of these resorts are going to be. But if you're visiting or living in Leavenworth, it's a good mountain, and I would have fun at Stevens, but I don't know. It's not really my favorite, so I'm going to drop it into D tier. If you disagree with me or think there's like a spot I didn't go to or find the good stuff, let me know in the comments. I'd love to go back and see more of it. Moving over to Idaho, we now have Schweitzer Mountain. Schweitzer's a fun mountain, I'm not going to lie. It's not the craziest mountain, but I had a lot of fun at Schweitzer. But really, if you get good snow, you can have a lot of fun at any one of these mountains, to be honest. The layout of Schweitzer is unique. It's basically just two bowls, one behind the other. So you'll have the Schweitzer Bowl in the front and then the Outback Bowl in the back. And then there'll just be like a whole bunch of places off the ridge or the top of the bowl that you can drop in. And some of it'll be no trees, some of it'll be trees. So there's good variety. It doesn't have a lot of super steep stuff. Well, let me say that. It has super steep stuff, but not long, super steep stuff. So there will be steep and good and expert for a little while. It just mellows out decently quickly after. So there's some really fun chutes over at the top of, I think it's the Lakeview chair. And then out in the back of Outback, there's a T-bar that gets you to some other good, really fun trees. So if there's good snow or it snows, it'll be a great time at Schweitzer. If not, it can be just okay. It's usually not too crowded though, and you do get a really nice view of the lake and the town of Sandpoint from the top of the mountain. So I do think it's a fun mountain. Nothing crazy though, so I think we're gonna drop it into C. Now, staying in Idaho, next we got Sun Valley. Now, Sun Valley's been voted as the USA's #1 ski resort in the past, and I honestly don't know how that is. I disagree with that completely. Like, sure, it's fun and fine, and it's a good mountain, but #1, no way. It's got a really nice town, and there's a lot of loyal people who follow it and go there. So I think that's probably why it gets all the following and hype that it gets, but I honestly just don't see it. Don't get me wrong, it's a fun mountain, and there's some good stuff. I just think it's overrated, to be honest. It has a unique feel, and it is decently steep. There's not like a lot of extreme chutes or anything like extreme terrain wise, but most of the other runs are like on the steeper side, but I don't know. I'm probably making it sound worse than it is. It's a fun mountain. Like, I had a genuinely good time skiing there. I just think people overhype it more than what it deserves. So for that reason, I'm going to drop it into D tier. You may disagree with that. Let me know. I'd love to know what your thoughts are. But the mountain itself just, I don't know. It was fun, but didn't do it for me more than any of these other ones. So that about closes it for the continental US. Now let's take a look at Alyeska. So I do want to admit I have not been to Alyeska. So this is the only mountain on this list that I have not personally skied, but they did just add it to Ikon. So I did want to include it, and I have talked to people, and one of my friends grew up skiing there. So I figured I would include it with that review. So Alyeska gets some pretty big snow totals, and it gets really good reviews from a lot of the people that I've talked to about it. It's not the biggest mountain on this list by far, but it has a very high concentration of steep terrain. So there's a lot of steeps, lots of double blacks, lots of expert level terrain. And that paired with the good snow quality means I'm going to put it up in A, with the caveat that I have not personally been there. So I need to go there to verify, but it sounds like it's a fun mountain, so I think that's fair to put it at for now. But that may change in the future. All right, that completes all of the US mountains on this list. So what do you think about this? Do you agree with these ratings, disagree with these ratings? Let me know what you think. And now we're gonna move on to Canada. So let's start in Banff. Now there's 3 mountains in Banff. So we got the Ski Big 3, we got Sunshine Village, Lake Louise, and Norquay. So let's start with Sunshine Village. The first thing I'll say about these Banff mountains is the views are incredible. Like, this is gonna be probably the best views for skiing in the entire continent. So it's just absolutely incredible, the view when you're skiing down these mountains. The only other like comparison that I have that would beat it would probably be like in the Swiss Alps, probably. But how's the skiing? Sunshine Village is a pretty unique mountain layout. Basically, you start in a parking lot and then you hop on the gondola and it'll take you like around and not up. So it like goes off to the side and then you corner around one of the mountains, and then you can either choose to get off at Goat's Eye or you can keep going to Lookout and Standish. So it's pretty unique, and I've never been somewhere that does it like that. Each one of those mountains has kind of its own characteristics. So Goat's Eye is a little bit more difficult, and it has some good chutes and steeper stuff, but it's also usually a bit colder and windier on Goat's Eye. But then Lookout and Standish are a bit more intermediate, and it's basically just like a big white expanse that you can go pretty much anywhere for the most part. So it's pretty cool and seems very vast, and the view is incredible, but it's more intermediate skiing on that part. So the real expert crazy terrain is off of this place called Delirium Dive, but you can't do that unless you have a buddy and avalanche gear. So I'm not going to really take that into account for this rating, just because you need some other stuff, and it's like not technically inbounds, but it's inbounds, but you need special stuff to get there. But I will say the stuff there is real wild and not for the faint of heart. It's like a pretty crazy drop in. Sadly, it wasn't open the times that I've been there since the snow conditions weren't great, so I haven't gotten to do it personally, but I hope to make a trip back there to do it when it's open. And in general, the Banff Mountains and Sunshine don't get a whole lot of mountain in general, so the snow can be a little bit inconsistent, but Sunshine usually gets at least a little bit more snow than Lake Louise does. That being said, I'm probably going to get some hate for this, but I'm going to put Sunshine Village in C tier. Like, it's a fun mountain, and there is some good steep stuff if you include Delirium, but the large majority of the terrain is just kind of intermediate and more flat. So it's a good time, but not my favorite. But now if we go over to Lake Louise, it'll be a little bit different kind of terrain. So Lake Louise seems to be more, sheer faces, cliffy rocks than Sunshine is. So it's the type of terrain that I personally prefer. Front side is just okay unless you're going over to the West Bowl, which is pretty new as of, I think, last year or the year before or something like that. But the backside is where it's at. So taking the summit chair and then lapping on Paradise is an excellent way to spend the day. The views are incredible, and there's just such a cool feeling dropping into the backside of Lake Louise. I don't know. I can't really explain it. Just if you're there, then you know. So this one's my favorite of the Banff resorts, and if it's a POW day, you're going to want to go here over Sunshine Village. But if conditions are questionable, then you can have a good time at Sunshine Village. But that being said, I think I'm going to drop this one into A tier. And then that'll just leave Norquay for the last of the 3 Banff mountains. And Norquay has the least exciting terrain out of the 3 of them. It's not that it's bad, it's just small. There's some steeper stuff, nothing like crazy though. So for that reason, we're gonna drop it into F tier. It's just more beginner, and with the other 2 mountains right next door, I'd rather ski at any of those, but the views are still incredible at Norquay, I will say. But this list isn't built on views, so sorry. Sticking with N and going back towards Calgary, let's just throw Nakiska in F tier as well. It's mostly groomers and a few glade runs. There's nothing really challenging there. It's just kind of a nice family resort, and the claim to fame is that it's the closest mountain to Calgary, so that's why it's going to go there. Then similar to Nakiska, but just a little bit further south in a different region, we're going to drop Kimberley in F tier as well. Just you don't really need to bother going to Kimberley unless you want some good family skiing, but there's just not really any kind of expert, super exciting terrain there for you. So there's some okay trees in the back in the Black Forest area, but there's just not a lot of pitch there, so you're better off going to pretty much any other mountain here. Next, let's do Panorama, because that's pretty close to Kimberley if I remember correctly. Panorama is one of the less visited resorts on this list in Canada, and so that means it's usually pretty empty. Like, I don't think I had to wait in hardly any lines when I was there. It doesn't get as much snow either, so it can be kind of questionable or variable conditions depending upon when you go, so you can't really count on there being good snow, sadly. That being said, when there is snow, it's a lot of fun, and there's some good areas to ski. Like, the front side has this place called the Extreme Dream Zone with some really fun trees that have some good pitch, and that's fun when there's snow. Or what you really want is you want to go to the back side to the Tainton, however you pronounce that. And that's where the really good stuff is. They even have a snowcat that you can take for like a $20 ticket to go from one side of the bowl like up to the ledge on the other for some fresh turns. And it's like I said, $20 for a ticket there. So pretty cheap if you want to get like one cat ski run in there. The bad thing about the Tainton Bowl is that it takes a while to get back to it. So you can't really lap it because you end up back around the front side of the mountain. So you have to take a couple lifts to get back up to it. So that's just kind of a pain. But overall, it's a fun mountain as long as it's not icy and there's snow. So we're going to put that into C tier. I like our blue tea that we got going on here. That's nice. And then next, let's do Fernie. Fernie is a solid mountain, but you're either going to have best day of your life here or the worst day of your life. The terrain is amazing, and it's kind of a unique layout where it's basically just 5 bowls stacked next to each other. So you just basically take a lift and go down the bowl that you want to go down, and you just kind of keep lapping that bowl, and then you transfer over to another bowl when you want to change up the scenery. So it's really unique, and it's a fun mountain. And when they get snow, it'll be one of the best ski days of your life for sure. Sadly, they do tend to get a decent amount of rain too, though, so it can be hard to plan a trip here and make sure that you're going to get good conditions. So I'd recommend doing like deep winter in February is probably the best time to go, but it's still no guarantee. Also, if you're lucky for like the 10 times a year that it opens, maybe more, but Polar Peak in the Curry Headwall is some really solid terrain. So unfortunately, it doesn't open all the time because you have to have really good conditions and visibility, and you have to have a deep enough snowpack. But when it is, that section is really fun, and that's like the top of the mountain. And then if you hike over to the Curry Headwall, that's where you'll get some steep and gnarly chutes and some crazy cliff lines. So when I was there last time, I was lucky enough to have it open, so I got to drop the Curry Headwall. So I'm stoked that I got to do that and check that off the ski bucket list. And for that reason, that brings Fernie up into A tier for me. Oh, and look at that. We're extending our blue tea. How fun. Let's see if we can keep it going. Now let's move on to Red Mountain. Now, I'm not going to lie. Red's a bit of a sleeper. So people who know are going to be mad at me for spilling the secret, but I think Red is an excellent mountain and absolutely worth the trip. It's definitely a skier's mountain, so that means that pretty much only serious skiers and snowboarders are going to go here just because you're basically out in the middle of nowhere in a tiny old mining town, but the mountain itself is incredible. It's got awesome glades and steep tree runs that are world class. It doesn't really have any kind of like big bowls or massive rock chutes or anything like that, but the steep in the trees are phenomenal. They get a decent amount of snow, not the most on this list, but a good amount on average. But the snow is very high quality and light. And the main thing with Red is since it's so in the middle of nowhere, there's like no crowds whatsoever, at least until everybody watches this video and then goes to ski at Red. So when I was there, like, I didn't get a massive storm, but it had snowed like, I don't know, maybe 8 inches to a foot the day before I got there. And I was still skiing on those powder pockets like 4 days later. And it was still getting fresh stuff. So it's insane. One downside or upside, depending on how you look at it, is all the chairs are fixed grip. So it is slow and they don't have a lot of loading capacity on the mountain. But that just means the runs stay fresher for longer. Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it was just my experience, and this might be where some of the personal bias comes in, but I'm going to put Red at A tier as well, just because, I don't know, it's really good, really steep, and I had so much fun skiing at Red. Keeping the good vibes going, let's do Revelstoke next. Now, you've probably heard a lot about Revelstoke and been hyped up quite a bit, and I'm here to tell you that it 100% lives up to everything you've heard. It has everything you could ever want as far as big mountain stuff goes. You have insane steeps, huge cliffs, like this is stuff that you see on the free ride tour, basically. So you can drop, 100-foot cliffs if you want to, or you can go like off to the side and still do more mellower stuff that's still pretty crazy, but the vertical is the biggest in all of North America at like 5,620 feet, I think, from top to bottom. So that's more than a mile from peak to base, just vert, which is nuts. Now, you're not going to be skiing all of that the entire time because most of the good stuff is more concentrated towards the top. By the top, I mean like the top 3,000 to 3,500 feet. And you're basically just going to be like lapping what's called the Stoke chair, which lives up to its name for sure. So you take the Stoke chair, go over into North Bowl, maybe drop into South Bowl side if you want to. And it's just really like, the best way I can describe it is a skier's playground. There's not really any like marked trails once you get over into the bowl side, so you can kind of go wherever you want to, really. And any line that you take is going to be amazing. The snow quality is some of the best snow in the world. It's light, it's fluffy, it's deep, it gets a lot of snow. It's probably my favorite place to ski. It's incredible. Since it's kind of out there too, it's not nearly as crowded as some of the other big name resorts like Whistler or a Snowbird or a Vail or something like that. And so you can still get some lines on the weekends since there's only 4 lifts for a mountain of this size, but it's nowhere near as bad, and skiing midweek you'll have absolutely no problems. So yeah, this is probably not a surprise, but Revelstoke goes to S tier and is probably number 1 in my personal book. I don't know, it's close with Revelstoke. I love Snowbird a lot too, so that it's close between those two. But there's just something special about Revi, and if you're a serious skier, you need to make a trip out there. Keeping the hype rolling with Revelstoke's neighbor, let's do Kicking Horse. Kicking Horse can be slept on and may not be known to a lot of people in the US, but if you know, you know. Kicking Horse has some of the craziest inbound lines and inbound terrain that's at any ski resort I've ever been to. Like, you can get off the gondola and just basically hit cliffs right away without having to do anything else. Like, what you're looking at from the gondola is like, you're thinking that that should not be open or skiable, but you'll see people just like hucking it and dropping off of stuff. You're like, that's insane. The lift layout is a little weird. Basically, it's one gondola from the bottom all the way to the top, and that's pretty much it. There's like another chair that will take you from one of the bowls. The lift layout is a little bit unique. So it's basically 4 bowls next to each other, and the gondola will take you from the very bottom all the way up to the top. And then there's like one other chair to get over to the other sides of the bowls. But other than that, that's pretty much it. There's still a lot of vertical, so you'll get plenty of top to bottom runs. But if it's a good snow day and potentially a weekend, you might be waiting in line at the Gondi at the base for a while, sadly. So it's kind of hard to find a pocket, and so I'm not the biggest fan of that. But luckily, a lot of people do hike to terrain here, so that kind of helps to spread it out a little bit as well. And the hike to terrain is insane as well. You can pretty much do anything you want here. There's a reason the Freeride World Tour is here as well. It doesn't get as much snow as some other resorts, but it's good snow quality when they do get it. But the main runs right under the Gondi are going to be tracked out decently quick just because, you know, they're easy to get to and they're not the absolutely crazy stuff. If you're an intermediate skier, I definitely do not recommend coming to Kicking Horse because there's not much for you to do. But if you're an advanced and expert skier, you're going to have the time of your life here. So with that, probably going to put it into S tier as well. The only reason I'd put it into A is because of the potential lift layout, but I don't know. Just the inbound lines and the cliffs and everything, the terrain here, yeah, it's got to be an S tier. Now heading over to Kamloops, let's check out Sun Peaks Resort. Sun Peaks Resort was kind of underwhelming for me, to be honest. You might disagree with me, but I don't know, just didn't really do it for me. Yes, it's Canada's second biggest resort, apparently, but the terrain's not the kind of terrain that I really liked, and it felt kind of weird to me, I don't know. It was mostly flat with a lot of groomers and some interesting pitches, but they didn't really have any kind of big mountain or steep or expert kind of terrain, really. And I went searching for it, but I couldn't really find it, so maybe I just didn't know exactly where to go, but I went pretty much all over the mountain and didn't see much that was super appealing to me. But if you're traveling from like Whistler to Revelstoke or the other way around, it's definitely worth stopping at Sun Peaks in Kamloops because it's on the way and it'll break up your trip. So if you're going through there, you may as well stop, but I don't think it's worth the destination ski resort for most advanced to expert skiers. So for that reason, we're going to drop it into D tier. All right, 2 left. We're coming down to the wire. Do we want to finish with Cypress or Whistler? 2 pretty different mountains. We're definitely going to finish with Whistler. So let's do Cypress first. Cypress is solid vibes and fun people, but it's really only worth it if you're a Vancouver native or visiting Vancouver and want to get out a couple of laps in. There's not really anything crazy or advanced or really expert terrain whatsoever. So it's more just to get, you know, a couple laps in if you're in Vancouver. No, it's still fun, but because of the terrain, we're dropping it in F tier. Wah, wah. All right, so close. Almost made it. Down to the last one at Whistler Blackcomb. What do you think? We're going to drop it in S, A, B, maybe you don't like it even more, maybe C? All right. Now, Whistler's regarded as the best for a reason. There's no question that it has some incredibly sick terrain and pretty much anything you could ever want in a ski resort as far as availability of terrain. But honestly, it's not my personal favorite ski resort. Now, it does have all the terrain you could possibly be looking for. It just seems to take a while to get there, to get to the big mountain stuff, in my opinion. So there's a lot of really good intermediate stuff near the bottom, and Whistler is huge as well with like a lot of vertical. So it just takes a while to get up to the top to get to the stuff I want to ski. And there's always just a lot of people and it's crowded too. It definitely deserves to be up here in the top in one of these categories though. Like there's no question that it's a sick mountain and has incredible and gnarly terrain that you can access. I personally need to explore it a little bit more to find some of that extreme terrain. I found some, but I want to go back and see even more because I've only been there a few times. But I just think there's like a few detriments or things that take away from the overall Whistler experience. That mainly being the crowd. So you can have tons of people at Whistler that take away from the experience. And then the traffic driving up there from the Sea to Sky Highway. Beautiful highway, beautiful drive, but you can be sitting in traffic for like 4 hours sometimes, which is no fun. And then the weather can be a bit wet and unpredictable at the base too. So you kind of got to go up higher to get to the actual good snow at times, and even then it can still be a little bit wet. I don't know, I just prefer like the super light dry snow that you get in Utah or Revelstoke personally. That being said, yes, Whistler is an amazing experience. The village is super cool and it has pretty much any kind of ski terrain that you would potentially want, but even though it's not my personal favorite, I do think it still deserves to be in the S tier for just everything that you can get there. There's insane terrain, amounts of terrain, quality of terrain. It's a good time for sure. Even if there are a couple things that take away from the experience for me, I do think it still deserves to be in S tier. All right, we did it. Every Western, Epic, and Ikon resort, plus a few extras thrown in there, all ranked on this list. So what do you think? Do you agree with this? Disagree with this? So let me know in the comments what you think.
Woo, we did it. Man, that was pretty fun. Some of those were tough and wasn't sure exactly where to put them because they were like right on the line, but I'm pretty happy with how things turned out. But what do you think? Do you agree with all the rankings that I had for these ski mountains, or do you think one should have gone up higher or lower? Let me know what you think in the comments, or I'll also put a link to this tier list template thing in the description so you can click and make your own ranking system if you want. All right, that's gonna do it for this video. If you want to watch what an average day in the life of a van life ski bum looks like, you can check out this video right here. Or if you want to see a van tour of this van that I built out that I use to travel to different ski mountains all across the country, you can check out this video here. All right, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.